Okay, this is Ethan Bashworth George, and in this video I will be analysing the design I made for the Unreal Engine Fortnite map we made, or that I made, should I say. I'm going to be talking about mainly the processes behind my Fortnite Ballistic map, focusing specifically on level design theory and the spatial composition, the player flow, and the comparative balance it took in order to make this map for a competitive tactical FPS shooter, and especially some of the difficulties that came along with that. Rather than approaching this purely as a creative build, I'm treated the build as a system space design problem. The primary objective was to construct an environment that supports fast-paced ballistic combat, because in Fortnite Ballistic you have very fast combat, movement, speed. It is very much in terms of your likes with your CSGO and your Valorants, but it is much faster tempo, I think is the best word I can use to describe it. Doing this while maintaining fairness, readability, and replayability, basically saying that I want this to be something that people can come back, play, and enjoy, that is something that's fair, and you feel like you have an equal shot at winning no matter what team you are on. Alright, so for the main part of this video, I'm just going to be staring up in the sky. I'll go back down later and explore some of the things I did on purpose within the level design, but while I'm talking about my core design pillars here, I'll just stay up here. Alright, so before beginning production, I established the three core design pillars, which is competitive integrity, controlled pacing, and strategic depth through spatial design. These three pillars act as the constraints that guided all the design decisions I made. In level design, constraints are valuable because they prevent unnecessary features from diluting the intended player experience, keeping me on track on what I'm truly trying to make. Keeping to these three pillars kept me on goal, basically. Since ballistic gameplay emphasizes precision aiming and precision aiming and positioning, and reaction speed, the environment needed to support clarity and tactical decision making rather than randomness. It needed to be easy to read. You needed to know, hey, if I go down here, I'm in mid. If I go here, I'm on A. If I go here, I'm on B. It needed to be clear, easy to read. So when you're in these high pressure situations, you know what to do and where to position yourself to closely align yourself with the game. So how did I start firstly making the level? So we start with blockouting. The blockout phase is a fundamental step in the professional level design, at least in terms of what I've experienced. Where basic geometry, obviously grey box, is used to basically set out the entire level. This grey blocks, or blockout, really helped me evaluate the size, the spatial scale, the engagement distances, player circulation, and line of sight relationships. When it came from translating my on-paper design to in-game, I realized that I've not used the correct scale. This is something I went back and changed and fixed, allowing basically the players to actually feel like they're in a Fortnite Ballistic map, not a Battlefield 6 map. It was too big, it was too wide, the scale wasn't properly read there in order for the thing, but this is why we do blockouting, so we can make these mistakes now and then change it instead of going straight into the business of making it all look nice and pretty. During this phase, I focused, like I said, on the macro layout structure, not all the micro or the macro, just like I said, focusing on the scale, the size, where the positioning is, where spawns are. Hey, this is where A is going to be, this is where B is going to be, this is where mid is. Trying to figure out where everything fits in rotation with each other based on the designs I've made and how they fit my design pillars. By separating some primary engagement spaces from these additional spaces, I ensure that combat occurs intentionally rather than accidentally. So as we can see down here, there's a lot of different flanking options. From here, we can go from mid. There's a lot of spaces where we can pull off from the primary route from getting onto a site. This is something that we've done in the blockout and helped me kind of pull back into the macro design instead of the micro. The micro, instead of being your line of sight where you can see, I focus mainly on, hey, where can we get flanking positions from? What are the time for rotates? Is this the right scale? This really helped me in order to make the map feel more competitive in terms of its FPS within Fortnite Ballistic. After I got a good solid layout, I started going into the player flow and the circulation theory I'm going to be using. When I'm referring to player flow, I'm often talking about how naturally the players are going to navigate through the environment. Because poor flow can result in stagnation or confusing in a game which just require you to make a lot of fast impulse decisions. So it's like, hey, I'm going to peek this, hey, I'm going to shoot that. We need to make sure that the player flow is very clear and concise for them, so they can say, hey, I'm going to go here and do this, hey, I'm going to do there and do that, allowing them to be proactive instead of reactive in terms of the to fit in mainly with more of the FPS genre. To support this kind of idea of what I wanted to do, I avoided dead ends. Basically, areas where it's just dead. It's just, hey, you walked all the way here, it's nothing. These aren't common in FPS maps, and there's no need for them to be in here. So it's just, alright, this is immediately get them out from my design. I also added way more choke points. Choke points are a massive thing in this game because of the utility you have. That's something I had to design around, as we can see down here. We can see that we go from one tight choke point into a lot of smaller choke points. So let's say you're on defense here, right? Let's go with phase. You can then fight this choke point, and then you can fall back to this choke point, or you can hide around here, making it easier for defenders to attack. But also, when we go to attack, it makes it easier for them to hold your line of sight. So we say we peek this, and allows them to split through sight in two different ways, taking a more advantageous sight. I put these all throughout the map, basically just to keep it in line with the real FPS genre and the Fortnite ballistic maps that I've researched. The design choice increases the encounter frequency while also preserving player agency. Players can choose to engage or disengage or reposition, reinforcing tactical depth. Like I was saying, based on the choke points, we can pull back into more choke points, forcing them to perhaps pull more util out, perhaps take more gunfights, take more light design where you might be in the advantage position. Or you can also go in and fight them and force them into these choke points where it's harder for them to get out of. That was all to do with the macro, basically. How are we going to be going around the sites? How are we going to be getting into the sites? How are we doing that? But let's talk about something a little bit more micro, which is the sightline management and combat readability I did. The sightline control is arguably this critical element in the ballistic map design. Even though it is a micro one, it's the most critical because of the main genre is first-person shooters. What angles can I take to kill you, basically? And the sightline defines the visual and tactical relationship between the two spatial points I have. The uncontrolled long sight lines create imbalance, and particularly long-ranged weapons, like snipers, making them too overpowered. So I had to factor in that while also doing a lot of the design, where I have to go, hey, we can't have these massive long sight lines everywhere. We need to create more short range to more long range. There needs to be a place where every gun can play. You can play SMG here or shotgun. If we go into mid, we can play the sniper rifle. Over here, if we want to play sniper, we can take lines like this, where it's like, hey, and then you can fall back. Or if you want to play SMG or a shotgun, you can play here. If you want to play rifle, you can play here. Basically counting in for the weapons in the game, based on the sight lines and how I'm going to contribute that to everything within my design. Took a lot of going around the map with different guns and going, hey, I can see you from there, hey, I can see you from this. And I learned a lot from doing playtesting. I obviously haven't caught everything, but if I was to go back over to the A site, one thing I did change was you could see all the way down to mid from here. I had to change it, so we had to move this box over and bring this wall out, because if not, you could see people rotating from the A site, making it, once you got onto a site, so overpowered because of these sightlines. That's just an example of how a bad sightline can completely ruin a map. Something I had to arguably do a lot of time into changing and making sure it all fits and make sure it's right. And to manage this, I really segmented the large spaces with structural cover. So there's a lot of places where they can hide, or places where they go hide away from the orb. I offset vertical levels to interrupt direct dominance. So like I said with the mid, even though it is coming down, you have to... There's different levels and it requires them to do more flicks, basically. It makes it harder for the sniper in order to shoot. And it ensured that strong positions always have counter angles. There's always somewhere else we can play or go push. So for example, if we know there's a sniper in mid, we can then go, hey, we can go through mid and go through one of the shortcuts into A, completely avoiding them, or perhaps even going around and pushing them here. Or we can perhaps go hide in the cubby here with an SMG or a shotgun. These principles basically prevents the static gameplay and promotes strategic repositioning. Now, let's talk about my verticality and my spatial hierarchy. Verticality was introduced to increase spatial complexity and create layered combat scenarios. However, verticality advantage was carefully monitored and moderated. Elevated positions provide important visual and improved visibility and control, but they also increase in exposure. By designing vertical access points that are contestable, I avoided creating inaccessible power positions that ensures the map control remains dynamic rather than fixed. Additionally, I use spatial hierarchy to differentiate between primary combat zones and traditional spaces. Large, more open areas signal high engagement probability, where tighter corners function as a connective tissue between these encounters. We're going through here to push into the larger gunfight, where it's the main objective. That's what I'm trying to say. When we've got all these shorter cutways, but it's to not make them as much of a dominant fighting area. You can still fight there, you can still get scrappy, but that's not the main objective and the main site that we're meant to be hitting. Another thing I took into consideration, not combat, while designing was the spawn placement. It directly affects the perceived fairness. If you can get onto site faster from attack than the defense can, that is a bad map. So as we can see, defense spawn is over here and attack is over there. It's increasingly longer for attack to get onto a site than defense. Defense, they have barriers and they have the ability to get there early so they can hold the site to stop the attackers from planting the bomb and winning. And also to avoid spawn trapping. You don't want to get into the situation where the defenders could push out immediately and the attackers can't leave or plant or even get a chance, or the other way around where the attackers can get to the defensive spawn faster than they can get to site. So to do this, I basically applied 3 principles: immediate access to cover, mobile exit pathways, no direct enemy sight lines into spawns. Basically meaning, hey, you can't just sit here with a sniper and shoot them from mid. Just making sure it's fair and simple. Visual hierarchy and environmental clarity. After gameplay systems were validated, I introduced environmental art elements. So stuff like the graffiti on the wall down here. Or stuff where it's like you can go, hey, this looks cool, but it's not an integral part of the map, right? Where it's just a part of the feel, or it's part of the city, right? You look around you, there's skyscrapers, there's little urban zones, there's little Chinese town. We've got a nice little park over here. Basically the look and feel about the visually, how I was going to be doing it. Through visual hierarchy, I used lighting, so a massive contrast to the combat spaces, simplifies material usage in high focus areas, so it's easier to read. So as you can see, the floor tile isn't different every single way. From different areas, we changed to different floor tiles, so different fighting engagements. From here, more scrappy, to here, to hey, we're on site, to here, we're in a mid. This is a different fighting zone. Basically, these little subtle differences that you may not think about, but something that your brain can immediately recognize and put you in a different mode, especially in something where you have to think you have to think quickly. And obviously in ballistic gameplay, visual noise can interfere with seeing people, shooting them, especially with the amount of utility that's already in the game. Therefore, environmental storytelling was implemented without compromising readability. You still needed to be seeing where you're going. Hey, this is site, I can plant it. Hey, this is a mid. Instead of going, hey, where am I? What is this? Hey, look, there's a truck over here. Hey, look at this giant burger. You know, the only time I'd say I did do this, which is in the spawn, which is an area where you're not going to be fighting in, based on the design principles I use. So it's just meant to be a nice little Easter egg. Alright, so talking about more of iteration and the reflective evaluations I did. The final stage of the development was the iterative refinement. Through repeated playtesting, I devised overperforming sightlines, like I said, managing them, and through testing I managed to change some to make them better. Underutilized areas, so areas where it's like, hey, this could get more value if I did some changes. This is one of the things I did here with the choke point, is saying, hey, for the defenders to push out a little bit to try to keep them before pushing in. Unintended choke points where it's like, hey, this wasn't intended to be like there's a great example is here, this wasn't intended to be a choke point in, but it also ended up really helping because now it allowed the attackers to have more control once they planted and make that a little bit more harder, because it is typically going to be more defense sided just purely because they're on site. Now we'll talk about a lot more of my design decisions. Let's talk about some of the smaller changes that I made throughout the map. And a lot of them have to do with different cubbies and hiding zones where we can create different crossfires, right? This is a massive thing important in FPS. So as you can see, we can hold crossfires here with other people to make it harder to enter the site, but also it allows for a combat depth. Where we can say, hey, we can go do this, we can get better, and there's a lot of different complexities you can do, like in Fortnite Ballistic, to improve and get better. Making this way more like a Fortnite Ballistic map. So, anyway, in conclusion, the map was designed as a controlled combat environment structured around spatial theory, sightline management, and player agency. Rather than focusing on aesthetic complexity, the design prioritizes on competitive fairness, tactical depth, controlled player flow, and I'm reading a little bit of a script here. Positional balance. Each architectural element serves this mechanical purpose. Ultimately, effective level design is not about the decoration I did, but more about the macro and the micro within the level and how it can be used. Thank you for listening.